So first things first, what I'm going to do is create now a new parametric project. So as we all know, I'm going over here to CAD Finder and I'll right click, within my demonstrations here and create a new COPRA project. I'm just going to call this webinar PM session. Now of course the information we complete here, as you'll see in subsequent sessions, is what's used to complete our attributed blocks on our automatic CAD drawings. So it's important this information reflects our tool set in some way, shape or form. And you can see here where that will be located, the attribute file I'm also using, and also here the spreadsheet template. And you can see I'm using a neutral line position of 0.35 and using constant length of the neutral line. So when I click OK, that's then created, and you can see here the live project is now highlighted in green. What I want to now show you is the possibility to store documents within CAD Finder. And to do that now I can right click here and click on New Project. So essentially I'm creating a folder within the webinar PM session project. So I'm just going to call this correspondence as an example, and you can see here all of the information I've already inputted come through with regards to this folder, and you can see where it will be stored on our hard drive here. So now when I make this active, as if we choose to, when we create assembly plans, roll drawings and DXF files, you can see it's now stored inside the live project. So just to show you now, we can literally drag and drop documents in here. So first of all, I'll just scroll through. There we go. So now we can drag the document across directly to CAD Finder. So what I'd like you to imagine is this is documentation that's all relative to our project. Could be a customer drawing, could be photographs of the machine, the mill, anything like that that's relevant to this specific project. And of course, I'm just looking for a PDF document as well. So literally by dragging and dropping them in here and accepting this information, you can see the documents are then stored in CAD Finder for us to access. You can see the picture will then be loaded and then PDF documents. Of course we have version history here, so we can keep track of previous documents. Imagine an initial sample inspection report, for example, which could ultimately evolve from a document where the product is out of tolerance to one where the product is within tolerance. This is all done here via the document revision. Okay, so let's move swiftly on now, and what I'm going to do is I'm now going to extract a cross-section from a three-dimensional product. So I'm just going to import a SAT file to do that, and essentially this could be a step file as well, directly from Inventor for example, or from SolidWorks and so on and so forth. So now we can see our component, and you can see I have an unsymmetrical section. What I'm going to do now is go to Punch Sheet, and once in Punch Sheet I'm going to go to 3D Model here, and within 3D Model have the possibility now to click this icon, which is Import Profile. So I'm going to import profile. Now, the nearest command is active, and you can see along this cross section here, I have the possibility to select lines and faces. This is specific to the orientation of the profile. And now we have the correct orientation of the profile. So the next thing we have to do here is specify our plane of unfolding. So I'll do that via flower. And now I will select After Entity and click OK. And then now I will select entity number 9. I'm happy with this plane of unfolding, so of course I click Yes. So now I can return to my 3D part. What I can also do now within the point sheet menu is I can click this icon, Unfold 3D Model. Again, given the option to pick an unfolding plane. Well, we know we'd like to have it with the legs pointing up, so I'm going to pick this surface here as the base, this face, and now I can right click OK. And now we can see on the cursor here now, crosshairs, is the flat strip directly from the 3D part. Of course now, as with 2D, I have to save this punch sheet. And now when I return to my window where the part exists, and hit COPRA Redraw, we can see the slots have now been added. What is now also a nice feature, if we go back here, I can erase our model. Let's imagine it didn't exist, and I can also create a 3D model of the part. And now I have the possibility to use one of the COPRA shortcut keys. I'm using number 8 to give an ISO view, so I hit 8 and enter, and then we can see our 3D part. And of course now I can use the views menu from AutoCAD to give this some realistic shading, and then of course use the orbit to have a look around my profile. Of course it's important to switch back to 2D wireframe. While on the subject of views, you can see we have these icons here now for two views and a 3 view, but also by using the numbers on the keyboard we can obtain those views. So if I type the number 2 for example and enter, you can see now the view is split into 2 across the screen where we have a plan and an isometric view. We can also use the 3 command and the 4 command. Now you can see each window being highlighted here. So if I want to make this window maximized, as well as using this icon here, I can also type number 1 and enter to give me that view. So now we have the whole pattern saved. I'm just going to close that. Now here we can return to my component. Now you can see here we have an unsymmetrical profile. What we can do now is we can use SpreadSheet to edit that. So by highlighting these entities here, I can then right click here and you will see that delete entities is greyed out. And the reason being for this, our plane of unfolding, as we know here, is referenced by element 10. And this is indicated by the red arrow here. And that means that element 10 here is referenced on the bottom or the beginning of that entity. So now by going here to the plane of unfolding, we can change that. So now I'm going to make it entity number 9, and this time at the end of entity number 9, and click OK. And now we can see that entity 9 here is referenced again by the arrow. And again I'll highlight these, right click, and now I can delete those entities. And now you can see we have half of the profile. And of course, what we can do now is we can use the mirror command. And now I want to mirror at the end of the profile. Now I can click OK. And now you can see we have a symmetrical profile made from an unsymmetrical one. And it's always important to identify here that the right hand side is essentially a ghost of the left hand side, and you can see our element numbers are the same, just with the minus sign. So at this stage I'll just create an archive, and I like to call that profile. So now if we imagine we had a part in the beginning with a successful bend sequence, and now we'd like to take this bend sequence and copy it across into this spreadsheet. So now we can go to that project and hopefully copy and paste the data in here. So I'm going to the Tricks and Tips project, and we can see here we have a shape we'd like to take the unfold data from. Make spreadsheet visible, and here we have an unfolding sequence. So by highlighting that, I can copy the unfolding angles, not the calibration methods I will add. And now that's onto the clipboard. Can minimize this. Switch back to our presentation. And now you'll see I want to do this unfolding sequence for entity number 6. So if I go here to this cell, right click, if I click paste, nothing will happen. Why is that? Well, that's because we don't have sufficient cells between the blank where we're doing no unfolding. So now we go down here and we use the insert pass command, and by doing that, that means you can now right click and paste, and then the data will be pasted into our spreadsheet. And of course we save our unfolding sequence. Now if we browse through our flower, we can of course do that here using this command. But what we don't see, which is quite often asked, is the modification data. So now we can go to settings via the COPRA utilities, and fade in the previous section. Hit COPRA redraw, and then we'll see the previous forming step in our flower. Now, when this comes in handy is when we're looking at air bending, for an example. We can do that now. I'm just going to insert a construction line in here. Should have been a vertical one. So if we go here, we can see now we can work dynamically on this flower, entity 6. And now we can apply that. And you can see now we have access to this corner, whereas we didn't previously. So I'll save the modifications, and of course now hit archive, save, and just flower 1. Okay. So now we can view our flower in 3D. So I'm just going to go and add some station distances. So I'm going to roles, right click here, station attributes. I can edit those. Let's make them 300 and use that for all stations. Now if I return to COPRA and switch to 3D view, I can activate all stations here. And within views, highlight realistic. And now we can use orbit to take an initial look at our flower in 3D. Of course, as I mentioned, it's always important to switch back to wireframe. We can also use these shortcuts here on the left hand side to apply the realistic. And switch back to 2D. And now let's just take a look at the last few angles which need unfolding. We can go here, hold down Control and here, right click, and we can create a bend sequence for 2 stations. You can see elements 2 and 4 listed here in 3 steps, and then we can click OK. Of course, if we have a saved bend sequence, a favourite of ours, we can apply that too. And now you can see the beginning or the basics of the flare pattern. Now we did that, one other thing to mention. Let's imagine we have some holes right now, but let's delete those. Now let's create a 3D model of our part. So you can see the holes have now gone. Now we can create a 3D model. Let's take the isometric view, number 8. Now we have the possibility to insert holes directly now into the 3D model. To do that, we go to 3D tool here, and within 3D tool I have some bespoke cutouts already saved here. I'm going to use COPRA FEA2 in this example, and then click OK. And you can see I'm asked to select the face. Well, I want to select this face here. Click OK. You can see that's in the wrong orientation now. So now if I pick the face a little bit further towards the top, can see here the vertical. Now we can see there. And now, by clicking on this side over here, I can project that directly through into the opposite side too. So now if we imagine we had a component where we had a mating slot for an intersection of an additional component, we can line up both sides here using this tool. It no longer requires the need to return to our COPRA view and to try and align them manually. Of course, I'm doing this right now in a symmetrical section, but if we were doing this with an unsymmetrical section, this could become quite tricky without this feature. And of course, escape this, turn to 2D wireframe, and now I use the unfold 3D model in the same way. Pick the unfolding plane, right click to enter, and you can see the fact pattern is here. I can save that. We can close this. And now when we hit COPRA redraw, we'll see our slots in the side of the profile here. So, a few more things to mention. If we don't have our toolbars docked and we're working in Flow, for example, and we want to use this particular tab, we can drag this to the working area. And of course, once we've finished, we can place it back onto the ribbon if we would like to. But of course, we need to make sure our toolbars here in AutoCAD are not docked. And finally, to mention the possibilities within CAD Finder, now if I return to Projects and we hit our function F11 key, alternatively right click here on CAD Finder, go to Miscellaneous and CAD Finder Options, if we ensure our COPRA MDI is active, that allows us to have 2 or more active projects at any one time. And I can do that now here. If I right click on Unsymmetrical Profile, I can go to COPRA Project in New Window, and you'll see the project also becomes active in there too. So now we can skip between the 2 active projects within its own AutoCAD drawing. So to reiterate, we can use CAD Finder to store all of our project documents. We can import 3D parts from step files. We can add holes to that. We can convert an unsymmetrical component to a symmetrical one within SpreadSheet. We can easily copy and paste unfolding data from other projects into this live project, as long as there is sufficient stations to do so. Of course, as you've just seen, we can now edit the holes in the 3D part, fade in our unfolding data, and finally the MDI function.